You may tomorrow be gone. Tomorrow may never come. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up to purposeful living now. That in this you will build your soul. In this you will be the difference. In this you will be the answer to the prayers of your man.
Saturday the 5th of March.
In this you will build your soul. In this you will be
2022, of course.
In this you will be the answer to the prayers of humanity.
Yes, we're back.
To live, and I know what state of God you are. It's a disaster.
The one of its kind in 2022.
To not know your purpose is a tragedy.
Mentoring Hour.
It's a disaster.
Coming your way from 1-to-1 Mentoring Network.
Rainfall, half spins.
A very beautiful body.
Harmony.
Seeking to give back to society what society is giving to them.
Sunshine.
Of course, you may say
half spins.
It is not all just good society is giving to them. But I tell you one thing.
Purpose.
The conscious can turn their manure to expand their harvest. So even if you think society is giving you something that is not worthwhile, turn it into manure and give it worthwhile to society. Today, three beautiful souls coming our way
so bright,
with something very important. Well, someone may say we're still in the pandemic. We're not off the woods yet.
You may tomorrow,
but hey, it's much better than yesterday.
May never come.
Lessons learned from the pandemic. Looking towards the future. Whatever the case may be, we have to look into the future. We have to make the difference. In fact, we have to be the difference and be the answer to humanity. That is Pepper's song by Fafa in the background. So without much ado, let's welcome our beautiful and handsome guest this very morning. Good morning, Dr. Inyang.
Good morning, Papa Smiley. Good morning.
Yes.
And good morning, everyone.
Yes, and good morning, Marvin, and good morning, Stephanie, as well.
Good morning.
Yes.
Good morning, Papa Smiley. Good morning, everyone.
I believe everyone is doing awesome.
Yes.
Yes, we are. We are doing well. And you?
Always smiling.
You look very well.
Thank you very much, Doc. I looked at the topic today and I said, lessons learned from the pandemic. Are we off the woods yet? What kind of lessons can we learn of the pandemic? Are these lessons going to make the world a better place? Are these lessons going to make the world a more joyful, peaceful place? Well, I couldn't find so much answers. But knowing very well that I have able women and men coming my way this morning, I said, okay, no problem. I'm always willing to learn. So I'll start right away from Dr. Inyang. And then you tell us. So first of all, why do we have to learn anything from something someone may say as horrible? Something that took many lives. Why should we learn anything from it at all?
Okay, thank you, Papa Smiley. Yes, that's a very, very good question, because I think sometimes we forget that we've been through a very horrible journey in the last couple of years. I'm happy we can all be sitting here smiling and happy and talking in a relaxed way, but this was not the case a couple of years ago when everyone was so scared. People didn't know what was going to happen. There was this horribly new thing that was creeping onto us. and just killing people and just spreading around the world. And for the first time in our lives, we were stopped in our tracks. So many of us were used to getting up and just running around the whole day. Many of us never even having time to take a break and enjoy our home or our families because we were chasing, this work and this money and making life ends meet. But the very first time, the whole world stood still. There was lockdown everywhere. You couldn't go anywhere you wanted to. And thank God for everything, for the science that helped us to develop some treatments and vaccines that can make us move freely again. And I think when you've experienced such a horrible thing, you have to be careful. Like you said earlier, we're still in the pandemic, but we have learned a lot of lessons. And I think that's what we're going to be sharing today. So that how can we stop ourselves from getting back to that place where we were? And how can we prevent ourselves from getting ill? And also living a more fruitful, sensible life. Because many of us have learned a lot of things. And hopefully we'll talk about that today. So, yes, there's always something to learn, no matter how bad the situation is.
Okay. All right. Even before I go on to the main questions, a question just came through. He says, will these lessons that you are going to share with us prevent future pandemics?
Well, we can never, we don't know about how, what is around the corner. Some people have been saying in a number of years, another one will come, or we don't know when. But I think there are things that we learn that helps us to limit the impact of, pandemics on us, which we will share. So we can't prevent another pandemic from coming, but we can learn something from what we've been through that can limit the intensity or the impact on us. And hopefully that we will take that forward from sharing this morning.
Good. I'll stay with you, and you start with lesson number one.
Okay, lesson number one. I'll say if there's one thing we've all learned now is hygiene. Um, we remember how people, hygiene. We thought we knew that, felt that we were keeping good, clean hygiene, really. But if we look back at ourselves, how many times would you step into your house and the first thing you reach for is food, despite where you have been to, you have touched so many things, you've touched so many, maybe on the transport when you're coming, you've touched so many things all along, and the first thing you reach for, you get the next thing, you put it on your mouth without even cleaning your hands and washing your hands. And that cascaded to most people, to the children as well. Children will go around touching things and then come into the house. So this pandemic made us, one of the biggest messages was sanitize, sanitize, sanitize. Wash your hands very well, sanitize your hands and make sure that you do all those protections. Even now, unconsciously, those things have stayed with us. So many of us are still wearing our mask, even though the government is saying, mask free. Many of us, when we go to places, we keep our distance from the person in front of us. And those kind of practices are still with us, despite the fact that, yeah, the government has said, reduce these things. But hygiene was one of those things that caused this virus to spread quite quickly between people. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons that we take from this. Many people walk around with, sanitizers in their bags. Many people consciously wash their hands now. And I think this is something that we should carry on and continue, because that would limit future spreads of infections.
Thank you very much. A friend of mine was telling me, he went into the bathroom, and he came out quickly, and the daughter saw him. The first question the daughter asked him was, "Did you wash your hands?" Yes, did you wash your hands? So it's very important, as you just rightfully said. We took so many things for granted when it comes to hygiene. When we step out of our houses, We go so many places, we do so many things, and when we get home, sometimes we simply even forget to wash our hands. And when we were drawn to the attention of hygiene, that hygiene, I think it has helped a lot of people going forward. Well, let me welcome Marvin. I know Marvin is into the business arena, so he will be giving us lessons when it comes to business, and our doctors will give us more lessons when it comes to health. So, Marvin,
Yes, Papa Smiley.
good one there. In fact, it's been long since I heard this baritone voice. How's the family? How's the family?
My family is very well, thank you.
Excellent. Let's go to lesson number 2.
Okay. So lesson number 2 for me is I personally feel, and data supports that investment in education and technology as part of the fourth industrial revolution is critical to the health sector. So I say this because when the pandemic hit and we're still in pandemic mode, there's been a lot of changes regards to how people seek health support. So telehealth is now the new norm. Equipment regards to supporting our current infrastructure within the health sector is moving at a faster pace. Educating our health workers and educating the public in regards to how they can use these new equipment and technological advancements is critical. So, my personal opinion, based on data, I feel investments in the health sector and technology is very critical to the current age we find ourselves in because we're not going back to the old norm, but we're moving forward to the new norm, right? So, education around the new equipment, around AI, technology is critical to the next phase of the new norm, if I phrase it that way. So that's why I want to say that's the next point. I can go in depth into it, but I'll allow you to ask pinpoint questions so I can elaborate more.
Well, in this lesson number 2, it's not for our individual levels, right? It's for governments to do those things, or what?
So it's both. So the government plays a major role. That's the public sector plays a major role from the government standpoint. The private sector also plays a major role, but they can do their best and invest, and then it's down to us to utilize those tools. Where we find ourselves in an age where the internet is available, even in Ukraine, for instance, where we have the unwanted activity going on. They've made internet available for some underserved areas, right? So you can have all the tools available, but if you're not utilizing it, you still fall short. Where people still currently still want to walk to the doctors for the normal paracetamol, right? Where you don't need to engage a GP practitioner physically for that, right? So it's utilizing the tools we have available, educating ourselves on how we can use these tools to move forward rather than staying in the old norm, right? So the government will play their part. There's a lot of investment in technology right now where there are private equities, private funds investing in all these areas, right? Um, and by educating ourselves, by educating our children to pick the right courses, even when studying, or even with the current crops of doctors, even educating themselves with the new digital equipment to enable them to adopt as well is critical, right? Because it's the new age, right? So it's more about adaptability and utilizing the resources we have at hand. So that's how I elaborate on that.
Okay, thank you very much for that elaboration. I know some of us hardly visit our GPs. Sometimes, once in a while, you need to pop in just to see if everything is all right. And now they say you have to book an appointment, or you have to do consultation with Dr. IQ or something, right? Well, it's something I don't like. You see, why Dr. IQ? I want to go and see Dr. Stephanie face to face. Yes, why? So as you said, if someone is not very careful, that alone They don't even want to go to see the doctor, let alone have interaction with an artificial intelligence and what have you. So as you said, we need to adapt to the changes that are already happening, and then we move forward to that effect. Thank you very much, Doctor. I already call you Dr. Marvin.
My
Yeah.
wife is a doctor, so I'll take it.
Yes, it means very soon it will happen, right? Stephanie,
Hello, good morning.
good
Hi.
morning. Are you adapting to the new technologies in your field?
Yes, yes. New guidelines are coming in all the time, so it's something as doctors we're having to definitely take on board.
Okay. All right then. Then take us to lesson number 3 then.
So I would say the third lesson that the pandemic definitely showed us was all about the disparities in healthcare. So when you look at literature that's emerged from the States as well as literature that's emerged from the UK, we can see that people from ethnic minority communities were more harshly impacted by COVID. And I think this pandemic's really shown that we have massive disparities in healthcare. We've now had multiple reports that have looked into the reasons why ethnic minorities were impacted. We can see maybe that there are kind of inequalities in health that now the government is really working hard to tackle. So I think you could argue this is something that's come from the pandemic that we can definitely look at to help us move forward into the future.
Well, you see, someone may say, are you very sure that they didn't know these disparities in healthcare that you are saying? Are you very sure they didn't know?
I think looking back at data, there had been kind of mutterings that there were health inequalities, but the COVID pandemic really exposed it. So many reports now have produced literature that shows it's undeniable that people from ethnic minority communities were very harshly impacted by COVID. And so as healthcare providers, as people in government, it's really important that we understand why, so we can make changes so that that is something that can be tackled in the future.
Okay, all right. On the individual levels, right? Ethnic minority people. What are some of the things that going forward on our individual levels we should do? Because one thing for certain, there are so many people in the ethnic minority who perhaps should be taking vitamin D. Some of them even don't know their vitamin D levels. I don't know if that's how you call it, right? I, for one, I think I went to my GP some time ago, and then when they did a check, they said, hey, yours is down, so you need to start taking those things. So, what are some of the things on our individual levels we should pick going forward?
So I think it's about being mindful about your health. So looking at a lot of the data, it showed that as people from ethnic minority communities, we're more likely to have underlying health conditions, things like diabetes, raised BMI. So I think on an individual level, it's about eating a healthy diet. It's about exercising, making sure you're watching your weight, making sure you're looking after your health. If you have an underlying health condition, make sure you're liaising with your GP so your diabetes is well controlled, making sure that you're taking your medication, really just making sure you're responsible for your health in the way that you can be, and just taking charge of your life in the way that you can.
I wanted to go to Dr. Inyang, but I'll ask you, as an African, what is a healthy diet?
So I really think there's a misconception that our food isn't healthy. I think there's ways around it. I think it's about, if, for example, you are someone who likes a particular type of food, maybe just making sure that you are having that food. So making sure, for example, jollof rice, having that, but also having green vegetables, making sure you're having good quality meat. So chicken, fish, rather than kind of pomo, shaki, all of those things that maybe don't give you any kind of nutrition, but making sure you're just tailoring your diet. I don't think it's about kind of saying African food is unhealthy, because I don't think that's the case. I think it's just about being smart with what you eat and incorporating things. So just making sure you're having your green vegetables, making sure you're having fruits, drinking water, but you can also continue to have the food that you enjoy as well.
So no shaki.
I think it's about having meat that's high quality, that gives you nutritional value. I'm not saying cut all the shaki
hasn't got
entirely, but I
quality.
think sometimes a lot of these meats don't give you any nutrition. So I think it's just about just being making healthier choices.
Oh, okay. Wow. I didn't know shaki was low value. All right, let's go to Dr. Inyang for lesson number 4.
I think just a follow on to what before I come to number 4, just a follow on to what Stephanie has said. Our food can be prepared in a healthy way. I think one of the things is the way we prepare the food sometimes. So if we're cooking vegetable, we load it with so much oil, looking at the oils we're using, avoiding things like frying a lot, looking at grilling your food. So that same food that you would like to eat, think about other ways in which we can prepare it that will be healthy. We have a lot of green vegetables, but it's the way we prepare it that makes it unhealthy. So yes, I just want to second what Stephanie has said. And I think another thing is we have to. I think what the pandemic exposed is that as from a minority population, we need to educate, bring up a lot of health education messages to our community, because of what people hear. They believe what they hear without sometimes getting the real facts. So I think it's a challenge for us again as professionals, health professionals, to actually access those things, make them available for our community. And just a bit of what Marvin said as well. The things are being put up, but we have to educate ourselves on how to use these things. And many of us from our communities, if we have to access healthcare, there are many people we can access healthcare from, but if we don't have the right technology, we won't be able to access it. So what does this pandemic has done is actually made healthcare accessible to people who wouldn't have gotten it. I've been able to see patients from outside this country who otherwise would not have been able to travel thousands of miles to come over to see a doctor. But because of something as simple as technology, you can see people from all over the world, so, and get the best care that you want and best information. So I just want to support what my colleagues have said.
Okay.
So the
Before we go on to lesson number 4, right? Um, someone is asking, when Stephanie talks about healthy dieting and what have you, is she saying we should just stop takeaways, our Chinese and what have you? Is she saying we should stop all those meals?
Stephanie, do you want to answer?
So I'm not saying completely stop all the takeaways, completely stop all of the Chinese. I think it's about doing things in moderation. So if you're someone that's having 3 takeaways a week, why not have 1 takeaway a week? Have that on a Friday night or a Saturday, and try and kind of plan your meals throughout the week. So that's something you're looking forward to. I think it's not about cutting things out completely. I think it's just about doing things in moderation.
Moderation. That's a word that gives me a lot of chills. Oh, your moderation may not be my moderation. So, what is moderation?
So I think it's just about, you're right. I think everyone has their own definition. I think it's just about making improvements. So again, if you're someone that's having 5 takeaways a week, why not cut down to 3? That's an improvement for you. I think it's just about making progress and making improvements within your own life. I think everyone has their own starting point, but I think as long as you can look back and say, okay, I used to do this, and now I can see that I'm making changes, I'm getting healthier, I'm losing that weight, or I'm making healthier decisions. I think that's the most important thing.
Okay. All right then. Thank you
I,
very much.
I,
Go on.
I think to add, I would say looking at the takeaways you are taking. So even if you want to say, I want to get a takeaway, you can still make healthy choices about the takeaway you are having. There's no point going to get takeaway that's, you can see, is laden with a lot of fat and all that. So you can still eat out, but still make healthy choices with your takeaway. And I think one big thing that Stephanie said is taking responsibility for your health, because that's, we've all had to make some changes. I've had to make lots of changes as well, and it's helping. Even little things help. So that's one thing that we should do. Pouring a lot of salt in our meal is not necessary. Eating things that has lots and lots of fat is not necessary. But there's so many places that do healthy takeaways as well.
Okay. All right. I'll stay with you, Dr. Inyang. There are some people like me. And no matter how much fat they will take, they will just look like me, right? So what advice do you have for such people? Someone may say, oh, I can eat as much fat as I want, but I'm still the same. What advice have you got for such individuals?
So, Papa, I would want to say that the fact that some people are lucky to still look, trim and all that, it doesn't always mean that it equals to very good health, because being slim and all that, it does not equate to, okay, that person can eat all the things they want to eat and still be healthy. Your health it's there's so many things that coming to make good health. You can look fit on the outside, but you can have diseases inside. You can still have diabetes and be thin. You can still have hypertension and be slim. So all those things that you're trying to prevent long-term illnesses, and it's still the same thing that you should eat healthily, exercise, because that's what's going to help you. And being, making the right choices all the time. So yes, you'll see somebody looking very slim. You say, oh, he's healthy, but he's eating everything. Just continue, even though you are slim, continue to eat healthy. And the other thing is that some people wonder why they look slim 1 minute, and then at a time when they think, oh, this is my lifestyle, I'm always going to look like this. It doesn't necessarily mean the next, you could have a complete transformation in a couple of years, and somebody would wonder that you who were looking very slim is looking, I'm not saying that's what's going to happen to you, Papa Smiley, but you who is looking very slim might look very different in a couple of years. It's a build up. Our health and it is a build up of practices that we have done over the years, and sometimes that can catch up on us at different times. So the thing is to be consistent, eat healthily, don't take your health for granted, eat healthily, and maintain a healthy lifestyle pattern.
Thank you very much. Lesson number 4.
So, lesson number 4 is our mental health. And that's one of the things I want to raise today. Many times, and now we're hearing mental health on TV, we're hearing it on radio, we're seeing the importance of mental health now. This was not something that a lot of us considered as top priority. Top priority for people were to rush out of the house, run and look at how much money they can make, no matter how detrimental it is. And I know from our community, there are people who were doing 2, 3 jobs without having adequate sleep, adequate nutrition, and adequate rest. And we can see that this had a great impact on us. So people who had underlying conditions, it was now coming to the surface. Children suffered a lot. Children's mental health suffered a lot for so many reasons. Families hardly had time to actually sit down and engage with their children. If you ask a lot of households, they hardly had that time in the day to actually sit down and find out what has happened to the child during the day or week, or engage with them, or find out what their worries were. Many children were worried from school. They had things they were bottling in, but parents hardly knew. Now, the pandemic was the first time that a lot of parents were actually spending time with their kids, and they were now picking up some of the things that they never saw before. They were now seeing that their young child was not really engaging with others, was moody. They were identifying lots of problems with a lot of children. And then if you remember the pandemic, it was stop, start. Okay, lockdown, stop 1 minute, go back to school, children go to school in bubbles. The next minute, the school is locked down. It was very, very difficult. So mental health was they couldn't engage with their friends the way they were supposed to. Things were changing very fast. They were seeing horrible things on the telly. They were hearing horrible things on the radio. And also their learning was also impacted. So many of them, for the first time, had to learn how to work independently. So they would give them work. They had to stay in front of the screens. And many parents saw the difficulties that their children had with this. So a lot of all these things affected children's mental health. Also, some of the children, especially with neurodisability like autism, and especially autism and anxiety, some of those children who used to have a lot of problems at school, becoming very anxious, the pandemic helped some of them because they became less anxious because they didn't need to go out, they didn't need to go to school where things were challenging. And so it now became quite clear how much school caused anxiety for a lot of children. So mental health is one of those big things that we became very clear during this pandemic. And that's why investing in how can we improve our mental health? How can we have better family time? How can we engage with our children better? We as parents, how can we explore those things that are troubling our children and deal with it rather than when it's so severe that the child is self-harming or threatening to do something to their lives? I'll just stop there and let you take up from there.
Very interesting. Uh, back in Ghana, when we talk about mental health, I think Marvin will bear witness. We think people who have mental problems are the very ones who are they've gone haywire. They are naked on the streets. They are just picking rubbish off the floor, eating and what have you. But with this explanation, um, every one of us needs to take care of his or her mental health. And it's just a switch. You can just go all the way down, and then it will become a menace. Someone says here in the United Kingdom or in advanced countries, many people are in suits, but they are mad. Yeah, many people are in suits, but they are mad. So we have to be very, very careful about that. Let me ask Marvin on that mental health. Yes. I know he is into the business field. When in the pandemic, many people were working from home. They weren't seeing people at work and what have you. What was the impact? And now that we are easing in gradually, I think all the protocols have been lifted as it stands now. Okay, what changes has happened after all these problems with the mental health and what have you at work? What has been the changes so far?
Um, yes, mental health is it's like you said, from where we're from, it's it's labeled differently, right? And when you haven't experienced it before, from where we're from, you downplay it, right? Um, as a matter of fact, I hadn't experienced it personally till the pandemic, right? I used to downplay it. I was one of those people who downplayed how impactful and how important mental health was, right? Till I experienced it myself, right? And um, when you experience it and you acknowledge it, it's easier to deal with it, right? Um, I won't bore you with the details, but I experienced it and I acknowledged it and I was able to work on it, right? But what has it done? I in my transition and within I used to work in a field where I used to be all over the world engaging physically with my clients, companies, organizations in different cultures, right? And then I transitioned to a period where I was just stuck behind the screen doing everything behind the screen. Um, I wasn't used to working on two screens. I always had my laptop and I was on the move every single time, right? So transitioning from someone who likes to engage physically with clients and people and love traveling and then doing that behind the screen, it pushed me to actually switch jobs, right? Because there was no, I didn't know when the end line was, when everything was going to go back to normal, where I could do that again. So I took the decision to switch it up due to other reasons as well. So the impact has been drastic. Um, are we ever going to go back to that norm again, where yes, the government have lifted policy, have lifted a lot of traveling embargoes, but it will never be the same. We have to work with the new norm, right? Where you have to find a way to read someone's body language via video call. You have to be able to, because you don't have that luxury like before, where you're talking to someone face to face and you can actually pick some pinpoints physically off them. Now, if my camera is off, you don't know if I'm in bed, if I'm standing, if I have a teacup in my hand, you can't tell. But if I put my camera on, you can probably pick a few things up But you can't use body languages like you used to, right? So it's adapting to all those techniques, right? And then being very attentive to all those techniques. And also confidentiality becomes another key point because you have sensitive conversation, you don't know who's behind the screen, who's listening, right? So there's a lot of adaptability. It will never be the same. I have learned to work with it. The moment I have the chance to go back to the traditional, I take advantage of it. So personally, I feel it's been different. It's impacted a lot of people in a negative way, but people have learned from it. People are still struggling to deal with it. But like I say, acknowledging it and working through it definitely helps. So I personally can advocate for that, saying I've experienced it, I've worked through it, I'm a better person now
Mm-hmm.
because I've experienced both worlds and I know how best to adapt, right?
Okay. Okay.
Like you can tell if you play back some of our previous videos, you can
Mm-hmm.
tell my posture is even different from our last
Oh yes.
conversation, right?
Yeah.
You can tell the way I look into the camera is different from what I used to do, right? So it's adapting and learning from every single encounter, right? I'll leave the score and I've made notes of some things I've picked up from Dr. Ingen and Dr. Stephanie as well, right? So it's learning throughout and making sure that you're improving. And making sure that that transition is a better transition from where you used to be. So that's where that's all I'll love to add to it.
That's the kind of testimonies I want to hear, right? I know I heard stories that during the pandemic, this same mental health caused a lot of problems between in marriages, because husbands were now spending more time with wives, wives spending more time with husbands. There were a lot of squabbles here and there. Some of them didn't even know themselves so much, and during those moments, you've been stuck with someone for 24 hours, 1 week. So someone was asking, which is good? Is it to be single, where you will be alone in your room, or to be with someone you may not know the person so much, and then you'll be stuck with which is which? But there was a lot of abuse in the homes here and there, and if you are very conscious going forward, I think so much changes must be done. I think I'll stay with you once again for lesson number 5, and then I'll
Okay.
come to Stephanie.
Okay. So lessons number 5, based on what I've just said, I have a few ones, but I think I'll go with um, the calculus for kids is just different. I say the calculus of kids is just different. Where when you look at the pandemic and you look at what has happened till date, right? The least affected were kids. The least exposed, no, the most exposed were kids, right? Recently they've paused the policies regards to vaccinating kids at certain ages, right? During the pandemic, my daughter was in nursery throughout. I've never had COVID, right? Um, Slightly backtracking to one of the things you highlighted about being stuck in a room with your wife and your family for a long duration, right? The pandemic was the best thing that ever happened to me, right? I've bonded with my daughter like nothing else, right? I do the school run, I shower her. I think Stephanie can testify to that, right? But then, like I said, my daughter has been exposed throughout the pandemic because we've been working throughout and she's been in nursery throughout. She goes to nursery 8:30 to 5:30, Monday to Friday, right? And God being so good, she's never even if she's got it, we haven't known about it. No one in this household has suffered from COVID, right? So what I want to say is, I'm yet to see that data. Maybe Dr. Yang and Stephanie can support me with that. But it's just amazing to see how kids have the capacity to deal with all these things that has been happening during the pandemic, right? So I feel their anatomy is different. The vaccines are great because obviously if you have been vaccinated and you're not exposed, you limit exposure to other beings who are around you, right? So I feel I'll go with that, where lessons 5 is it's how the kids have had the capacity to deal with it, right? And their immune system are now different. In the next 20 years, if we have a similar thing, I feel they'll be in a position to deal with it better. And like I said, learning from what we've seen, learning moving forward it's critical. So that's where I'll put my point at, and I'll allow you to ask pinpoint questions based on what I
Okay.
just said.
All right. The anatomy of children different from us. You said the calculus for kids is what is different. Is that what you said?
Yes.
I thought calculus was mathematics. Marvin becoming philosophical now. Anyway, let's ask Dr. Stephanie as to why kids were able. You said you needed their help. Why kids were able to handle this pandemic more than us?
I think there are a number of reasons. I think so. One thing I wanted to talk about was resilience. And I think with children, they're very adaptable. They're very able to quickly learn new information, take it on board, incorporate it, and kind of move forward. So I think, again, as Marvin mentions, his daughter was going to nursery. She kind of was going through the pandemic, but she was able to kind of adapt very quickly. And so later on in life, it means if there is another pandemic, hopefully there won't be, she's learned those skills that will enable her to kind of navigate that completely differently to someone who maybe has gone through the pandemic at a slightly older age. I know that there's a lot of literature that's coming out about kind of why children were less impacted in terms of their response to COVID, in terms of the symptoms they get. But in terms of kind of resilience, I would just say that children are often very good at kind of adapting to new situations in a way that sometimes we as adults are not as good at doing.
Oh, okay. All right. Dr. Inyang, would you want to add something to that?
So what I would just like to say, like everything else, children, it's not they were carriers. You'd find many of them that were carriers, but the problem, and this was the emphasis on the pandemic, it was not the kids themselves coming down with overwhelming infection. We did see some children having some symptoms and infections, but it was the contact that they had when they came across people who were vulnerable, like in the family settings, because COVID has to come from somewhere. Somebody has to bring it into the house. So the child who carries it will be fine jumping around, but it's the family members who had risk factors, who came across the children. That's where they would pick this from. And as we know, like everything else, as we get older, our bodies are, like a tired car. It's not working the way it's supposed to be working. Everything, our immune functions, everything. We don't fight off these things, and it becomes worse if we have underlying factors. So yes, a lot of kids were going to school. Many of them, you'd come back being positive, but they were not coming down with the infections. Their immune functions, adapted to this better. Children come across a lot of infections in their early ages. That's why you see children coming along with colds a lot in nursery, but they'll still be bouncing around. And during that early period, they're exposed to a lot of things that's building their own immunity, but they were able to bounce this off quite quickly. Yes, they were resilient to some extent physically, but that's not to say the pandemic still didn't have an impact on them, because for the ones who had underlying difficulties, they felt it more. So in a group where you have some children being able to adapt easily in and out, there were also a lot of children who were emotionally unstable, who found the whole thing quite difficult. And sometimes that emotional impact has been much more than even the physical impact of them having the COVID infection. And that's what we're seeing in children, that it hasn't been the overwhelming hospitals being full with children on admission, but it's been the emotional and mental health complications that we've seen. And I think Marvin has said a great thing. The pandemic offered him an opportunity to bond with his daughter very well, do all those things, which Marvin probably would never have had the time to do, considering what his busy schedule was. And that was that kind of emotional security was so important for a lot of children, but not all children had that, especially depending on how the nature of the homes and all that. Not all children had that. So one of the positive things which Marvin has brought out is that family time, which I talked about, getting to know your child more. And by Marvin being with his child and doing all those things, enabled him, gave him a greater satisfaction than, a lot of things that he would ever have had. And that's one of the positives from the pandemic. So yes, physically, they came out okay, they were fine. And the emphasis was on limiting them being in contact with more vulnerable people, because they could be carriers, be fine, and the vulnerable people would become at risk.
Okay, thank you very much. Someone is asking, is it because children had not taken so much shaki and kotodwe? That is why. Stephanie brought that up. It's not me. Stephanie brought that up. So, is it because children have not, at their ages, taken so much shaki to affect their immune system? Anyway, Stephanie, let's go to lesson number 6.
So I think lesson number 6 for me would be just about humanity's capacity for resilience. I think all of the responses we've had have kind of touched on that briefly. So it's just something I kind of wanted to highlight again. I think, again, going into the pandemic, it was something that was new for all of us. And so it was very interesting just to see the way that we were able to adapt, especially within lockdown, how people were then soon able to work from home. Lots of people kind of adopted new hobbies, new habits that they incorporated into their lives. Things even as simple as travel being suspended. Lots of people then decided to have staycations and went to explore the UK and other parts of the country. So I think really the pandemic's really shown that as humans, we're very resilient. We're able to kind of cope with new situations and find ways to survive and to thrive. And I think that's something that the pandemic really highlighted.
Interesting. I had a question on my mind, and then you brought in habit. Some people were stuck on some of these, TV channels, TV packages, and what have you, during the pandemic. After the pandemic, they are still having some difficulty getting themselves off those things. Some people were stuck in bed, watching a whole series all at once. And now that the pandemic is over, possibly, let's say, calm down, they still go to work. And when they come back home, instead of them resting, they switch on the TV and they want to watch like 3 episodes, 2 episodes, and the next thing they realize is way in the night, and they have to wake up going back to work again. What are some of the possible ways you can advise such individuals to get back on track?
So I would say, for example, within my own life, when it comes to kind of TV shows and kind of Netflix or binge watching series, I think it's important just to have kind of set times where you do that. So maybe an hour an evening, or maybe say, okay, Friday night is the time where I can give multiple hours to finish a show. I think it's just about having kind of a structure. Maybe advise that particular person to kind of keep a diary, just so they kind of can be accountable for their time. Because I think I can imagine if they're going to bed in the early hours of the morning, having to wake up early, they're probably going to work and they're tired. And that kind of gets into a cycle where you're going to work, you're tired, you're then not enjoying your day, you're not as productive. So I think maybe if they can just have an episode in the evening, and then maybe say Friday or the weekends, I can really kind of splurge if I have the time. That's what I'd recommend.
Okay, so moderation, yeah?
Yeah.
Moderation,
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Dr. Yang, lesson number 7.
So lesson number 7, one of the things I picked up a lot, and I like learning from people, but I saw people discover other bits of themselves which they never had time to discover. So they discovered hobbies and things that they could do. Some people even started businesses in the pandemic. So it's interesting that the pandemic was a time when businesses shut and a lot of businesses closed, but some people actually discovered the talents they had. I watched a documentary recently on a young girl, I think she was from Ghana actually, who by trying to treat a bit of a loss of hair on the front of her hair, she made a homemade cream and then used it and saw it was working. And she used this technology that Marvin was talking about to display her product, and it went viral. And today she's running a very big organization supplying things around the world. And this happened during the pandemic. I was so taken by that. So a lot of people discovered things about themselves during the pandemic. And why was that? They had time to actually shut down all the noise that happens every day, and they had time to actually spend time with themselves and think about what can I do. And I think that there's a lot of creativity in so many people, but because we're always up and about and running, that stalls it. So I think reflection, just looking at what you can do and taking that forward, making connections that can help you to expand that. So many, actually, the pandemic, there was a report that came out. This was my husband who shared this with me, that small businesses grew a lot during the pandemic. There were many entrepreneurs that were created during the pandemic. Not the big companies, not the mega ones, but small businesses thrived a lot during the pandemic. And who are those small businesses? They're just normal people, normal day you and I. So again, it comes back to having a balance so that you can have time, make time for yourself. There was a phrase I got from a friend called, so she said to me, we have to be intentionally purposeful. And that phrase has been very good, being intentionally purposeful. Create time within your day where you can sit down and reflect and look at what is the positive thing that you can do. That positive thing that you can do can be a passion, but that passion can turn out to be something that gives you balance and also gives you an income. So creativity is my is the lesson I'm talking about. Creativity, enabling yourself to be creative. And it might be when you're going for a walk, an idea pops into your head. It might be when you're, doing the most mundane things that, ideas crop into your head. But it comes back to everything we've said: balance, rest, mental health, sleep. All those things help us to generate our creativity. And I think that's one thing that we should take forward with the pandemic.
Thank you very much, Doc. To a very noble man, he has solution hour every day, where he as you directed, he sits, and then how ideas flows into our mind. It's just awesome. So he purposefully solution hour, where he connects to the cosmos and is able to download solutions to whatever problem he may be facing. So I think it's something very important. I'll go to Marvin. You see, talking about solution hour and how ideas also come in. How about our spiritual life? Any lessons that we should learn going forward? And now, some churches are still doing their church service online, right? Are there any spiritual lessons that we can equally learn going forward?
So when it comes to spiritual, when it comes to belief, when it comes to faith, I feel it's more of a personal decision in regards to how you want to move forward with that. First of all, I'm a Christian, and I have a strong faith, and I believe in Christianity and where I sit. Yes, the pandemic has led to a lot of digital transformation where churches or prayer of worships have been transitioned to a digital platform. But then as Dr. Onion said, there's been openings. You said that we're going back to the new norm where the expectation is, can we go back into those groups or those type of setups to enable our spirituality, right? So I say you look at yourself as an individual and you ask yourself, have I drawn closer? Have I grown spiritually, or have I moved back, or have I backtracked, or have I am I a better person from where I used to be, right? And in my place of worship or how I practice, am I better off going back to my traditional ways, or am I better staying in my current situation, right? For instance, I moved into a digital type of worship. My spirituality has grown personally. But then from a physical standpoint, someone might say, oh, we don't see you in church a lot, right? But then my personal spiritual life, I know that I've grown, right? Due to some of the challenges I've encountered during the pandemic, right? So I feel it's more of a personal decision. It can't be dictated by anybody. You have to own your own faith and your own spiritual well-being. So your fellowship might advise to come back into an open setup. I think if you want to, you can do that. But then what I say is, if you were contributing in any way or form, or you are a support of that group, and you haven't been able to offer those supports, being it helping in a setup of those communities, from moving church to moving equipment, or move talking about your tithes, or talking about your offerings or offertory. Yes, no one was used to sharing offerings by bank transfer, right? So it's mainly just making sure that you are doing the things you used to do before the pandemic, and then just asking yourself, how can I improve, or am I a better person before the pandemic? So it's one where I'll just say everyone has to own their own spiritual life, and the decision is in our hands to make that decisions. But then the bits I've added to is where I sit and what I've experienced spiritually during this process.
Interesting. Interesting. Would you want to add something to that, Dr. Adeyemi?
No, I feel that Marvin definitely captured everything really well. So I have nothing to add.
Okay, all right. How about dating in the new era that we find ourselves in? You see, now everything is becoming digital. So is it going to be digital dating? Some of my friends say it's becoming harder and harder finding a partner if you are single. See, so Abi, you know, right? So what is also the way forward with that digital dating, e-dating? What is the future for that?
So I can only talk from kind of the information that I'm aware of. And kind of talking to friends, talking to my peers, it seems a lot of people are relying on dating apps. So digital dating, as you mentioned. I actually know a few friends who've met people on social media apps, so Twitter, Instagram. They've just maybe been in different groups, or people have messaged them directly and it's turned into a relationship. So I feel like you can meet people anywhere, but I think given the climate we're in, people are relying heavily on e-dating on apps. And I think it seems to have continued, even though lockdown's officially over. That seems to be the way that people are meeting. But that doesn't mean you can't meet people face to face.
Okay, so what would be your advice when you are to meet someone? You should ask for the vaccination card, isn't it? Or because we are not in normal times, so should you ask for vaccination card before
So
perhaps you can take a
some
quiz
kind
or
of
something?
dating platforms actually have a section where you submit whether you've been vaccinated. So on different people's profiles, it will actually say this person's been vaccinated or they haven't been. So you don't necessarily need to ask. That data will be given to you.
So
So, Papa, I want to say that
okay,
just a second what Stephanie has said, that there have been a quite successful relationship. I certainly have two friends who've successfully met people during the pandemic and have married, and I've had a child. So that, it's been positive. And like you said, if you think about, for 2 years, people couldn't meet themselves physically, and the only way they could connect is online. It's been quite useful. Obviously, you need to look at checks. You need to look at who you each person has to put in some checks in what they're doing. But it seems like this is going to be a very prominent way of connecting socially for a lot of people.
Okay. All right. So, Marvin, nothing should stop the game, isn't it?
Not at all, not at all. It has to keep happening.
All right. Thank you very much for that. Some people have been held back when it comes to that, and I think the fear factor is also playing up as well. People becoming intimate in such times is quite challenging for some people. So, as Marvin has said, nothing should stop the game. Yes, nothing should stop the game. We should carry on. We should carry on. Well, I think we are on top of the hour. And one thing that I'll ask all of you to share your views on before we round up is what kind of mindset do some people have that in the midst of this pandemic they were still able to thrive? Some people were able to make millions of pounds, millions of dollars. Some people, as Dr. Inyang said, discovered themselves. Some people were able to identify certain wonderment in their lives. What kind of mindset should we develop so that even in the midst of something destructive, we will still be able to thrive on? I'll start with Marvin, and then Dr. Inyang will come in, and then Dr. Stephanie Adeyemi will give us her final words. So, Marvin, what mindset should we develop?
I'll go for. So first of all, I'll say each and everyone must have a mindset of knowing that you're capable of doing anything, right? So the capability of tackling anything that you felt that it wasn't a norm, right? Like we've all heard stories about how people have evolved during this pandemic. I'm a testament to it. So is knowing that you have the capacity to do anything that you want to achieve, and having that endurance, right? Yes, it might look like you can't reach those goals, but you have to know that you can, right? And being ready to be intellectually challenged, or being ready to have that zeal and that capacity to endure, because with those tools within your backpack, is anything is feasible, anything is possible. So those are the things I would say. And just being open to learn. With all these tool sets, the sky is the limit. Regardless of your background, regardless of your culture, regardless of your anatomy, right? So yeah, that's what I would say. I can go on and on, but in a nutshell, that's how I'll put it.
Thank you very much. So, Dr. Inyang.
Yeah, thank you. Just catching on the last thing which Marvin said is being open to learn, and I think that's number one. That even though you had been going on track A, and track B is a completely different track, you can learn how you can get on track B and begin to grow on that area. Being flexible. Many of us have had to do things. In the pandemic, I've had to now adapt to doing a lot of online consultations, which I wasn't doing before. I was always seeing my patients face to face. I used to be one of the people who would be like, no, I must see them face to face. And I've almost completely swung the other way to saying, I do a lot of online consultations privately for the private patients I see. And I've seen the value and the scope in it. So being flexible and being able to change, adaptable to change, and having a positive mindset that even if you fail, you will stand up and you will continue to move on. So I've learned a lot. I'm one person who the pandemic has, given me a lot of positives that I can take forward, and that's because I opened myself to learning a lot, and that's what I would like to advise people to do: to be flexible, learn, and be positive mindset.
Be flexible, learn, and be positive. Stephanie, your bit.
I think just following on from that, I think also if you can, it's useful to have a mentor. So someone who maybe has gone along the path that you're trying to go along and can give you advice. I think it's always helpful to have someone just to kind of show you the way. I also think it's about setting goals as well. So I think a lot of during the pandemic, I often heard people mention kind of having like manifestation boards or kind of goal boards. But I think I was listening to a podcast yesterday and they were saying actually, for example, if you're setting a goal, you need to also think about the sub goals as well. So the example they gave is okay, people have a manifestation board and they'll maybe have a picture of themselves or of someone running the London Marathon. But on that board, also have waking up at 4 a.m., doing this, doing that. So you need to have the smaller goals that lead you to that bigger goal rather than just saying, oh, I want to make X amount of money. Also think about how can I get there, the steps that it will take to get there. So I think it's about planning, goal setting as well. That's what I would add to that.
Interesting. So, within the macro goal, you should have the micro goals that will lead you to the
Yes.
macro goal. Yeah.
Yes, because we often focus on the end goal, but we don't focus on the journey.
Okay.
And I think the journey is an important part of the process. So I think it's just about thinking about taking those small steps as well.
To get there. It's been an exciting session. Yes, a lot to take in. We might not have been able to put so much flesh on some of the things that you shared with us. Hygiene, investing in education, AI technologies, what have you, disparity in healthcare, mental health. Marvin, calculus for kids is different. Talking about the anatomy of kids as against our own adults. Human capacity in terms of resilience, right? We've been so resilient, and we've been able to discover ourselves or bits of ourselves which perhaps we didn't know before the pandemic. The list will certainly continue. These are just bits of the things that I know we have all learned, and we know listeners have also learned in their own way with regards to what we've all been through. I know they may have certain questions, or they would want to get in contact with One-to-One Mentoring Network. Dr. Adeyemi will be giving us all the various ways, areas that you'll be able to contact them, what they do, and if you need any of their support, how you'll be able to reach out to them. So, Dr. Stephanie Adeyemi, over to you.
Okay, so thank you. So One-to-One Mentoring Network is a platform that we offer a number of things, but our core product is kind of bespoke mentoring for individuals from kind of the kind of Black and minority ethnic community, as well as other communities also. Again, we've mentioned kind of mentoring and learning as an important part of achieving your goals. And so that's why we believe this is an important kind of network to be part of. You can find us on social media. So we're on LinkedIn, we're on Facebook. Our Instagram is One-to-One Mentoring Network. And our website has all of our resources. So you can find us at one-to-one-mentoring.com. So that's one-to-one-mentoring.com. That has all of our resources, all the things we offer, and also an opportunity for you to kind of get in touch with us if you want to find out a bit more about what we do and if you want to join us as well.
Thank you very much. Someone is asking, will Eba be Eba without Shaki?
That's a good question. I've not said that you shouldn't ever have Shaki or pommel. I've just said doing things in moderation. That was the word. So incorporating different types of meat. And also Eba tastes nice with with fish, with chicken, with beef, with other things too, with green vegetables. Like it tastes, yeah.
Looking at how you are putting it, it seems Marvin, you have to go and eat some eba, you know. Thank you very much, Dr. Young. Thank you very much, Marvin,
Thank
and
you.
thank you, Stephanie, for your time spent with us today. We hope it wouldn't take so long for us to come back with another session, right? It wouldn't
Thank
take so
you.
long, right?
It won't. It won't.
It won't. It
Excellent,
won't.
excellent. All right,
Thank
then.
you, Papa,
Enjoy
for
your
having
weekend
us.
and then stay blessed. Bye
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye now.
bye.
Thank you.